All right, YouTube, let's do this. For those who are here early, which is to say, the stream hasn't been live for much more than what, 6 minutes, or available for 6 minutes in the not live, but yeah, yeah. I actually while we'll wait for people to come in, I was worried I would not be able to live stream tonight, and I will describe this as generically as I can with my work requirements, but basically for the last week and a half, I have not got home before it's like 7:30 p.m. my time, and later typically. Usually it's 8:30. Uh, and it just we're in a really crazy busy time. Um, and there were some things that happened that basically forced us to push even farther into a delivery week than we normally do. So normally, like, we have this cadence where every 3 weeks we deliver an update to our product, right? So if you think like crunch is crazy in some other places, for those who are familiar with like tech crunch in the gaming industry, our crunch is every 3 weeks. It's rough. And it can be extremely rough sometimes. And this is one of those cases. So, like, if I look or sound tired, I am. But, I was seriously wondering if the work on my team's plate today would even get done in enough time for me to be able to get home to stream. So I got home 12 minutes ago and had to hurriedly put together my stream. And I had like two topics in mind last week, and basically I had to pick the topic that required no research because I've been working so much. Anyway, yeah, we'll get rolling here in a sec. One thing I do want to a little shout out just for those who maybe have missed a few things. I'll put a link in chat, but if you are one of the people who like somehow missed this and have been trying to get a pair of my Blue Hawaiian Moscow guppies, Jason over at Redfish Bluefish, who's in chat, has some available now. I took a number of pairs out there. I think we started conservative just to be safe, but we took a good number to start the spring-summer season off to hopefully get more out than we usually were. So there's still some available. I don't know how many, but that's for Jason to say. But there you go. There's a discount code, too, that saves you 10% off your fish. Stay awesome. Just a little thanks to you folks for those who've been waiting for those fish. He's got a lot of other really cool stuff in too, by the way. But yeah, so let's get on topic, because other than what I'm trying to do, right, which is not really a digital fish club, but I think we're seeing this out of necessity, at least. Some of the bigger clubs within the United States, and I don't know how this is happening internationally. I would love to hear from folks in Germany or the UK, where there are very strong pockets of the hobby. And I don't know specifically what clubs are where. To be clear, outside of the US and parts of Canada, I'm kind of clueless. But we're seeing out of necessity, because of human malware, that a lot of clubs like Maasai, the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, Minnesota, there's the Circle City Fish Club, and I know I got their full name wrong, but and there's like San Francisco, I think, is doing it too, where they've converted their meetings to be online and digitally available. And some of them are even streaming, right? The Greater Seattle Aquarium Society and Mass Eye are the two that I know off the top of my head that stream their meetings. So you get to see these speakers who very typically don't want anything recorded at all, or they don't want things put out there available to the public in mass, because part of their whole thing is they take a lot of time to, whether it's their travels and then put together presentations afterward and talks. Part of their ability to just kind of travel and other fish clubs and stuff is by making sure that these things aren't available. And whether you agree with that or not, it's what a lot of them do, right? And I get it, like from the perspective of a lot of those folks, they spend a lot of time and money traveling in order to do, whether it's collecting fish live, like, you know, Gary Lang does, or Lawrence Kent is another great example, who's actually local to me, but is a fantastic speaker. If you've never seen him and you get a chance, go see him. He's amazing. You know, there's incentive for them basically to like keep their topics and their talks off of like YouTube, for example, because then they can do a circuit of clubs with the same talk for a while. And, you know, they can very well have one talk go 1 or 2 years and kind of slowly move around at their, depending on which clubs want to bring them in and that kind of stuff. Right. And thank you to the folks in chat mentioning like Sacramento, the San Francisco, have also had streaming events and talks. It's been great. But we've seen some of the clubs shifting, and it's interesting because I'm not sure about all of them, but for the most part, it seems like the stream is up temporarily or only a live event, and then it is archived and not available afterwards. So if you're live, you can see these talks even if you're not a member. And some of them, you know, they're keeping it only to a Zoom meeting or some similar thing like Zoom, so that you do have to be a member. And so here's a great example. Paul Saltero is mentioning the Raleigh Aquarium Society is doing their meetings via Zoom. And, you know, that's a way that they're keeping their members engaged. But some are pushing even further. And the question starts to become, the more that these clubs look at this, or other people see this happening and go, can we just make a digital fish club? Probably the best example is going to be, of course, Aquarium Co-op and their membership program that they have now, right? If you're a member through YouTube, you're basically a member of the online fish club they're creating. And they have a robust plan of, from what I can tell, I don't have inside information for those who might be curious. Like, I don't at all. But just from what I've seen in some live streams, and I am a member there, so like I, you know, see whatever their member information is. They seem to have a pretty robust plan of various speakers and trying to even create other benefits similar to what a local fish club would have. Like the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, for example, I'm sure almost every other club is like this, has a set of sponsor stores. And if you're a member and you go to one of those sponsor stores, you get a discount, right? Simple. It advertises the store. The members who continue to be patrons of those stores get a little discount on their orders, stuff like that. It's win-win for kind of everybody. It encourages members to go to specifically those stores instead of anything else. And it encourages the stores to basically continuously have something available to engage with those members and engage with the club. And some clubs do more than others, don't get me wrong. Like I think a lot of places have newsletters, tend to have like a page that advertises all the stores that they have deals with. But like, say, Aquarium Co-op is trying to do something where like you could go to any fish store, in theory, is their goal, right? Long term, and get some kind of discount for being an Aquarium Co-op member. And that's like the digital club mentality. So the real question is, can these work? Where is the the difficulty. Let's say you're a more traditional club like Maasai, the San Francisco Aquarium Society, any of these, right, that have been around for a long time. What's the trouble for them to transition to do something like, we've got this is a great conversation about folks from Texas, but remember, it's like saying that, like, hey, I wish I could be a member of the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, but I'm outside of the state from Filigree Aquatics. You've got things like that. Well, if these clubs start transitioning to a digital, whether it's a portion of their club or maybe even entirely, in the case of some clubs, who knows, right? How does that change the way they work, and can you make it work? So here's the problem that's going to occur, right? As you go digital, some of the parts of like club events become hard. And let me give you some examples. When you go to like a club meeting, there's a lot of like socializing that happens before and after the meetings, where members get to just sit around and BS, or maybe there's auctions that happen. When you start doing this digitally, there's lots of changes and nuance, especially like in the case of auctions, that gets a little weird. If it was a full digital club, and let's say like normally I have no problem taking plants to my club meetings, but if it's a digital club, now I have to ship my plants. I might be a little concerned about having, say, my address go out to some random person I don't know, as opposed to just bringing in bags of plants and selling them with just my member number on them, right? Some people might have problems with that. So that there's also some weird logistics that happen. What happens if this thing dies in transit? Now you've probably got people that are like, well, I paid money for this, I want it to live, right? We have all these interesting things around some of the social event type things, especially when it comes to auctions. But when it comes to presentations, that's the thing I think most people care about. Like Filigree Aquatics here is like kind of almost raising, you're like the perfect example of somebody I have in mind here, where it's like, I would pay to be a member of a club just to watch the backlog of presentations or to watch things live, right? You're exactly the person I'm thinking of when I talk about this, in that for that portion of a club, especially if the club membership is really cheap, like, the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society example, it's like $15 a year or $20 a year. It's nothing to be a club member as far as cost is concerned. Where our club makes its money to do its events is by taking a portion of auction proceeds, right? So without that, let's say that like we have all those problems with auctions, it becomes really hard for the club to function, and their membership probably has to change. Whereas someone like, say, Corey, in his plan, you have a monthly amount you pay to YouTube, and that just pays for the club, right? Now, in the case of presentations, as long as they're made available for some amount of time to the members who, whether they can't watch it live or whatever, because like, let's say that you're getting a speaker from Germany, and or you live in Germany, and a speaker is going to present on Seattle time. So if they're presenting at like 6 p.m. Seattle time, and it's 4 a.m. in Germany, you're probably not going to be awake to watch that. But you might want to watch it during your lunch break the next day at work or something. So how do you balance the technology side of this if it's not purely through something like YouTube, as an example? How do you make sure that all these things are available and easy? This starts becoming very challenging, right? This is the challenging part. Now, certain people who are more tech savvy, or certain clubs that are more tech savvy, can get easier. But there's all sorts of problems, and like Corey has explained this really well in a live stream when he talked about what their plan is, where, well, how do you deal with a person who has a bad microphone or has a bad camera, doesn't understand how to like use a light to make their camera look good? Things like this. Like, look at some of my earliest live streams when I didn't have a decent light, and like it looks terrible, right? Well, imagine speakers like that where they look terrible. They're using like a gaming headset like this where the microphone sounds meh, or like some kind of technical issue occurs, and if the speaker is not very technically savvy, how do you fix these problems ahead of time? Right? There's lots of little problems. So can it even work? The short answer is this. Kinda. There are certain parts of what traditional clubs do that it would probably be very, very difficult to have function in a digital club. And I think the biggest thing is going to be like auctions where you auction plants and fish and all that kind of stuff. That gets pretty tough. But I think from the perspective of as long as you have the right people running it who are tech savvy enough and you set things up and you prepare it when it comes to like speakers, that part of the club, an interaction between members can be created through things like live chat, forums. You could even have optional kind of like your Zoom meetings or similar type meetings where it's just like, hey, you can come in and have conversation, right? Where members can just kind of talk to each other, or we can do member spotlights and things like that where it's like, okay, each member gets like 5 minutes to just talk about their favorite fish. And one meeting is that or something like that, right? You can do these little things that help your digital club get to know each other the same way a physical club would in person. It's a little different. You have to take some different approaches, but it's possible. So the real question beyond that is now, as human malware gets tackled and life returns to some semblance of normal, how many clubs will continue to use the digital aspect they've opened up versus will they just go back to the old way of doing things? Or, more importantly, the clubs that are trying to establish themselves, like Aquarium Co-op's Club, how much pull can they garner or sway can they acquire if those clubs decide not to continue any form of digital support? That's what I think is the interesting part for us as hobbyists or fans to watch, right? I think in some semblance, certain clubs, I think Maasai is probably the best example, but I'm sure some of the other ones will do it too, are going to keep a digital presence because they've done something, they have a person running it who's really passionate, is doing a great job. I'm not sure about like my club, for example, the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, which I love the fact that they have digital meetings, but I don't know that the second we're able to meet again in person, that they'll continue doing what they've been doing, because it changes how everything is done as soon as in-person returns, and I don't know that they're willing to set the technical stuff back up. And like Philly Ray Aquatics is mentioning, Sacramento is keeping the digital presence for sure, which is awesome. I probably really need to go follow the Sacramento Club because I think I paid attention to them in one of their early digital meetings, but hadn't continued to do so, mostly because it's easy for stuff to slip out of my brain right now. I'm working my brains out. Joe Davis. So I feel both digital and in-person meets can take place. I agree. However, there has to be compromise on both parts. Yeah, I think, Joe, that's definitely something that I hope a lot of the clubs that have been doing stuff consider. Because I feel like part of, and this is some personal philosophy, part of the like, I'm going to hoard my information so that I can travel more as a speaker, which is a lot of tends to be older speakers. But I feel like that hurts more than it helps. And I understand it's part of their gig, but a great example is this. And Corey mentioned this, but like, you would have speakers come to the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, and they would be like, oh, well, I've got this book I just put out. I'll bring some for the auction, and they'll bring like 3 or 4. And then it turns out that if they just sent out an email that said like, hey, I recently wrote this book, I'm going to be present. How many of you would be interested in buying the book for, whatever the special price is for the meeting instead of buying it off Amazon or wherever the heck you would normally? And you'd find out like, 50 members want to buy a copy of the book. And you bought you brought 3, right? Right? Like there's a difference when it's like I can buy one from you in person. If I care about having you autograph it, I can have it autographed. That kind of stuff, right? A great example for me was when Karen Randall came to our club. She had recently put out her book, and she was one of the people who, like, ahead of time was like, hey, if you're interested in a book, please email me. We'll get you on a list. If you can pay ahead of time, that would be great. And I'll bring that many books. And, like, I think she sold like 70 copies of her book just to our club because everybody wanted one. Almost every member who was going to come to that meeting wanted a copy of the book. And she had like little extra meetings on top of it that were earlier in the week because she spent a whole week up here that had an extra talk. And there was like people who showed up to that to pick up their book early and get the extra talk. And then the normal meeting, the people who couldn't make that one showed up, watched the normal talk, picked up their book, stuff like that. And I think like something like a digital club, right? How much different does that become where if it's, if the aquarium co-op is like letting you know, like, hey, we're going to have Karen Randall on. She's got this great book about aquascaping and aquariums and the underwater garden, as she puts it. You can get a special price through our meeting because she's a speaker, and you get it for, $5 less than it normally costs, or $10 or whatever the heck it may be, right? And there's a special link for members that takes them on like Aquarium Co-op's website, and they just ship you the book, right? Because they order like 1,000 of them or something. How much different is that for speakers? It changes that mentality of like, well, I kind of make some money and get to travel by doing this. Well, now you can, if you have something, you can make it in a different fashion. And I think that's the way that hopefully needs to be used to incentivize speakers to make their information more public, instead of it being kind of hidden behind like, well, if you didn't go to that club meeting, you don't know about this talk, right? It's one of those things that I think as a technologically savvy person who understands the modern digital age a little better than most, that whole kind of barricading that knowledge behind, this is how I get to travel to clubs, sucks. It sucks. Miguel, who buys books online anymore? The info's online. Some of us will buy books for the photography. Some of us buy books because it helps support that person, right? While the information might be online, I love most of the books. Like, I have Crystal Castleman's basically like Aquarium Plant Bible. And while a good amount of that information is online, not all of it is online. So it becomes interesting. Plus, it's a way for me to like put a little money toward Crystal Castleman, who does all this great work, who's still doing tons of plant like exploration and research and all this kind of stuff that's very applicable to the aquarium hobby, right? And it's kind of a way for me to be like, I like what you do, lady. Let me support you. Also, I get this cool thing that has a ludicrous amount of information about plants and some really great photography, right? I call it the Plant Bible for a reason. So, that's my spiel. I am very hopeful that a lot of the clubs who are starting to implement technology to allow them to have digital aspects to their club continue to do so, or even expand it further. I'm also hopeful for people like Aquarium Co-op who are trying to do true digital clubs. And while my online horticulture program is not a digital club per se, and I'm sure if like Corey does some HAP program, he'll just like kick my butt endlessly, but I would like to think I might be able to do it a little bit better. Maybe not like maybe not the execution of the actual technology, because I can't afford to go hire like a massive tech firm that builds websites like him, but just conceptually about trying to find ways to educate about plants through a well-designed program, that I can do pretty well. At least I think I can. We'll find out. And for those, there was a question about asking an update. We're at the point now where a lot of the back-end code that handles how certain things work. So basically, like when you submit a plant, right, in the club, in the program, it sends an alert to me, and then I have to go look and verify all your information and look at your first picture that shows like, here's my initial planting of, Pogostemon octopus, right? And let's say you put down the scientific name is Ludwigia octopus. Well, I would either have to fix that or I'd have to reject it and say like, hey, you have the scientific name wrong, right? Make sure you get the right scientific, whatever it may be. Usually something like that, I'm just going to fix it for you. But anyway, then when you get your first propagation, you add a new photo to it and it shows like, okay, here's my original. Now here's it propagated. That comes back for approval. You get approved and it adds your credit into the program. So that kind of back and forth that occurs is what there's kind of no off-the-shelf solution that handles that. It has to be done in an amount of custom code. And that's where we're at. We're trying to put as much of the foundation into place with some of the off-the-shelf parts that we can that are available to like my web designer and web dev is the easiest way to put it. And now we're at the point where there's the custom code portion that has to get finished up. We're hoping that a majority of it's going to be done in the next couple weeks. And then I have to test it, make sure that it works the way we want it to work. And then from there, can look at a slightly wider test. And from there, release. The biggest problem is just there's between my work schedule, which has kept me busy. So a lot of my things that I do on my side of this have kind of had to get pushed back because my work's just been insane the last few weeks. But yeah, excuses suck. I know. Working on it, trying to get some stuff done, doing as much as we can, given both of our schedules. But hopeful that in July at some point we can launch it. Not quite as fast as, say, like Corey, but also 2-person show with nowhere near the budget. So can only do so much. Yeah. Dude, we're doing good progress, though. I'm really hopeful. I'm getting excited about it. I think that's the important part. I have a lot of, once we have all the stuff in place, then I can start filming all the tutorials, and that'll be a big thing, right? Is filming the tutorials will be big so that I can walk people through how to use everything. And like once I get to that point, then we're super close to being able to launch, and that'll be really sweet. With all that being said, question time at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see your question. If for some reason I don't get to your question or it needs more context, bentley.pasco@gmail.com is my email. There it is in chat for those that are in chat. Feel free to email me. I'm getting close to fully caught up on my email. I was way behind for a while. But yeah, getting caught up, working with some people. For those who are curious, like the new series that I'm working on, the kind of in-depth solutions, which is the one that won, I'm actually working right now with a couple of people on their tanks and trying to help them solve some problems that they're having. And we're getting some great pictures, and we're walking through the process. The big thing is that this won't be something where we just get the first email and then I just like say some stuff. It'll be literally, I'm going to walk through with these people, and it might take us a couple months to actually see progress in their tank, working toward the real solution of whatever their problem may be. And then and only then, as we start to really narrow down the problem and see results trending toward the positive to fix the problem, then and only then will a video be built around this. So I'm excited for that because it's kind of voted on by you folks, right? And I do it in email all the time anyway, so why not walk it through and create kind of a library of information at the same time? Because we can watch like real people's tanks get a little bit of help and go from like, hey, I'm having trouble with X to my tank looks great, right? This is, maybe it's, might not be what you dreamed of, because like I remember when I got back in the hobby, I had big dreams of making these beautiful aquascape tanks. Then I found out like I'm terrible at aquascaping, but I can make plants grow real dang well, and I can get good looking tanks anyway. Just not all the crazy rock and woodwork. I'm bad at that stuff. Well, all right. Snail Team 6. Bentley, does anyone know, should I feed baby brine to my cherry shrimp? Is it wrong? You mean feeding shrimp to shrimp? Is that wrong? No, you can feed baby brine to shrimp. Just understand that they're not going to eat as much, and it generally has to like settle down to a surface. So you're not going to put quite as much in as you would for, say, fish. But yeah, no, you can definitely give baby brine to shrimp. I used to do it with some of my neocaradinas back in the day. I'd put like a little teeny amount in after I'd fed all my fish. If I had a little extra leftover, I'd give them just a little itty bitty squirt of baby brine, and they will get to it. But yeah, no, it's, if you're talking about is there some moral implication to whether or not it's wrong? No, it's just a protein source. You know, that's one of the things. It's perfectly fine. Leo Contreras, best way to control Malaysian trumpet snails. Okay, well, it depends on your control. How to control overpopulation of MTS, how to remove. Well, if you want to remove them, then I would say there's a number of ways. You could use snail traps. You could wait at night to when they start coming up out of the substrate and then like use one of those little rollers that roll snails off, or just net them off. You could get loaches, because loaches just devour snails left and right. You could try assassin snails, although they're not quite as great when it comes to Malaysian trumpet snails as, say, like bladder snails or ram's horns, but they will get some of them, right? They just, when they're hiding under the under the soil, it's a little harder to get them, but they'll get to them eventually. Or finally, feed your tank less. The only reason that the Malaysian trumpet snails have a lot of food is because there's excess food from when we feed our fish. So if we learn how to really dial in our feeding, then there's no food for those snails, and they will starve out. It's really hard to do it perfectly. I want to be very clear. This is not like you're just terrible at feeding your fish, you silly goof. No, it's really hard to do it perfectly. But you can get the amount of food down to where you will not have a massive explosion of those snails. Now, me personally, I like Malaysian trumpet snails because they help handle all the stuff in your substrate and prevent pockets of anaerobic bacteria if you're trying to prevent that, right? Now, some people want that, and they don't want that to get prevented, but it all depends on your goals. Like me personally, I'm not trying to do anaerobic bacteria pockets anywhere. I'm trying to keep stuff loosey-goosey for all my plants. I don't want too much ridiculous buildup, but I like the way that those snails process all the extra stuff that gets down to the substrate and helps make it even easier for the plants to feed off of. This is all positives to me personally, but some people just hate the look of them, and I totally understand. And in that case, there's a couple of options. The easiest is probably something like a snail trap. The second would be like, look at something like a dwarf chain loach. Some of the smaller loaches, they're really, really good at hunting those things down and eating them. If you want a live solution, if you don't want a live solution, a little tougher because you gotta figure out how to really dial in your fish feeding. Natural Aquarius, Bentley, love the hat. Yeah, man, it's Tacoma Rainiers, my local team. They're the Mariners affiliate AAA ball club. Got to play on their field once, plus the beer is a local icon. Yeah, icon's a word. Icon's a word. There's lots of jokes about Rainier beer because it's not great, but you know, it's ours, and that's what matters. I think a lot of places feel like that with their cheap local beers. That like, yeah, it's not good, but it's ours, so it's good enough. You know, it's one of those things. I was never a fan of the beer personally, but you know, it's a local thing. I actually have a really special jersey to me that is the Rainiers from the olden times, right? It was a throwback thing that the Mariners did, but that's kind of special to me. Uh-oh. My lady's in chat letting us know Papolino was saying hi. He's being a corg. He had some time with a trainer today. So we're working on getting all the pups to coexist with some behavioral training, with a professional trainer and all that kind of stuff. Because, yeah, man, we need it. Zendiger, it's ours. Yeah, I mean, it's just how it is, right? You get that in a lot of places. Oh, man. All right, Joe Davis. I really like this question. What's your most memorable club meeting, online meeting you've attended, and why? That's okay. So I have two answers to this. The short answer is when Gary Lang came to my club. So I kind of have a story about this back when I bought a bunch of Gary's rainbows when he came to my club, and even Aquarium Co-op had a video that kind of featured me for a while in it because of the auction was kind of hilarious. But I had been waiting like 9 months for Gary to show up. I'd been planning, and mind you, part of this was while I was unemployed selling aquarium plants to make money. I talked about that in a video where I said like I'd almost gone homeless, and I kind of joked that's bombastic, but there's a weird like philosophical way to say that it's actually true. But I had been planning tank space, slowly saving my money and making sure that I could get all the fish I wanted. I talked to Gary 6 months before he was going to come out, just like, hey, I just want you to know, I'm really interested in whatever fish you're going to be bringing. If you have a chance to get an idea ahead of time, so that I can kind of start planning some of my space. And this is like, Gary didn't really know me, but members of my club kind of vouched for me. So, he was like less worried that this like crazy person was emailing him. And then we talked back and forth quite a few times and like grew kind of a friendship. And when he came, I'll tell the story because I find it hilarious in hindsight now. But basically, when each of the rainbows I wanted came up, I just held my club number up. And I was standing in the very back of the room. I wasn't sitting down. I was just standing in an almost intimidating like way. And eventually our auctioneer just would like look at me whenever a fish came up and see if my number was up and goes, where do you want to start it? And it was all eggs. Keep this in mind. No actual fish, just eggs for the auction. The fish he had sold ahead of time, and you had to get in ahead of time, which I got all the stuff I wanted, of course. And he would just look at me and I was like, you have this many eggs, $35. And a lot of my club like would just give up. Because the first couple they tried to like go into bidding wars for, I just would hold my number up until I won. I didn't care. I remember specifically I had saved up $700, which back then, at that time, was a lot of money for me, right? It took me that whole 9 months to save that up. And I remember I had all this money and I had this very strict budget in my head of like how much I could spend per set of fish to make sure I got all the fish I wanted. And before the meeting, before the auction, Dean and I got together and we're talking about what fish each other wanted to make sure we didn't go bidding against each other. And there were a couple other people in the club that I did the same thing with, where we talked and was like, hey, which ones are you after? Okay, good. I'm not after those. I'm after these. And we made sure we weren't bidding against each other. So we all planned this out. It was kind of insane. And I went up to Gary afterward and just like, I thanked him for bringing all the eggs he brought and just, yeah, I'd really enjoyed the talk. And he goes, I don't know, you kind of paid one of my kids' way through college, so I guess I've got to thank you. Kind of joking because Gary's a bit of a jokester. And ever since then, man, Gary and I have had a really great relationship. He's just a cool dude. He's a no-nonsense guy, which I really appreciate no-nonsense people. It was good times. However, after that, let me tell you my favorite one. So there's a local member to my club named Lawrence Kent. Okay? And the thing about Lawrence, much like, and I would say it kind of ties, but Lawrence is just slightly ahead of Dean in the sense of they are both amazing storytellers. It's less about the science of the fish and this, and it's more about the story of their trip. And listening to that story was so engaging, so enjoyable. The pictures of how they did things and what they did just hook you. And you don't feel the time. Because, like, I've had plenty of, like, I've gotten to watch Odd Connings. I've gotten to watch Karen Randall, Dr. Eric Thomas, who's fantastic. But there's a lot of science in those, and they can feel like they drag on, right? These presentations are designed to be an hour and 15 minutes, and you can get half an hour in, and you're like, ooh, I gotta stay engaged, right? It can get a little dry at times. Some speakers are better than others. I want to be super clear about that. But it can get a little dry. And for some people, that's tough. But, like, Dean and Lawrence are storytellers. They make it a story, something engaging, something entertaining. You're always kind of laughing here and there. There's enjoyable pictures. And it's not about, like, well, and here you'll see the difference between this fish and this fish. This one has this many rays, where this one only has 2 less than that. And, like, there's not the science of crazy stuff. It's more about the adventure, right? Dean has 2 talks about his trips to Peru. Lawrence Kent has a couple about, like, times in Africa, times out in Malaysia. And it's like 10% of the talk is about the fish. 90% of it is about the adventure and the story about how they got those fish, how they found them, the people they were with, the things they ate, the people they met, the experiences. It's storytelling. It's an art form. Joe Davis said this in chat very well. That hooks me. And part of that is because, like, for me, you know, I worked in radio for a while, and part of how you engage people is that natural kind of storytelling thing, right? That is very engaging. Those are the most memorable to me because outside of me, like, fanboying for my fish hero and getting a ton of rainbows, those are the ones that I would go watch them again, happily. The same talk, and I know I would be just as engaged because the story is that engaging. It's like watching a good movie that has a story you enjoy. The story pulls you in every time. That's what makes that talk. That's what makes it special. You could watch it once, twice, 10 times, and it would probably be as enjoyable every time. I love that question. Love that question. Rico Stan, welcome back to being a member, buddy. All I got says, it says new in YouTube, but then it shows your member badge. You're clearly not new. Leo Contreras, would pea puffers mess with my breeding group of L134 that I have in the tank? Maybe, probably not. Peas are a little, I mean, they can be nippy is the thing. They might go fin nip, and that might piss the plex off. So, in general, I think if you're ever breeding anything, you almost want to isolate that fish or only have it in things where you know they'll work together. Like, you can have guppies breed in with plecos, and it's okay. As long as the plecos are getting their food, right? Or some other fish that's similar like that, like, you know, mollies and all the live breeders, stuff like that. You can have shrimp in with a lot of plecos, and it does just fine. That's all great. But you get some potential issues, especially with pea puffers, because they can be little jerks. They can also just be really cool. Let's be fair. And it's one of those things where, like, it depends. Me personally, I probably would avoid it and just focus on breeding the L134s because they're great fish. They're not super hard to breed, but it does take some time and some patience. And you just really want them to be happy, feel good. And if anything, you want some dithers or something to make them feel more comfortable and more safe so that they are more likely to breed. Personal choice. You could probably try it and just see what happens. To be fair, but if something goes wrong, don't forget to have like a 10-gallon tank on the side to be to be safe and move those pea puffers over. Dolbeck Aqua Designs. Bentley starting up a bidding mafia. Kind of did. As well as it was like we were all just like, hey, so I'm after this the Running River Rainbow Fish. Are you trying to get that one? Oh no. I want the one from Luban Village. All right. I won't bid on Luban Village. You leave my Running Rivers alone. All right. There's a lot of that happening between like basically me and like 4 other members. We had like a 5-person group that was like organizing so that we didn't bid on each other, and then was like, okay, well, as long as your colony stays healthy, if I want fish down the line, I'm like, hell yeah. You know, like that kind of stuff. and Alyssa Bentley, a fellow GSAS member, one of the other members of Team Bentley. It's okay. I didn't start like I did not create the live stream until like 6 minutes before I had to go live. So that's probably why the notifications are super late and terrible. All right, there was one. Shane Fitzpatrick personally made a potted garden with carob sea sand and over 30 pounds of aqua complete and flue ball stratum in a 125-gallon tank. Have geophagus, African brown knives. How big do African brown knives get? That's my thing I gotta think about. Clown loaches, big. And Congo tetras. Congo tetra live bearers? What? Or is that supposed to be Congo tetras, comma, live bearers? Thoughts? Well, I mean, assuming that you're using the pots to like protect the plants from the geophagus, I think it can work just fine. You've got to worry about like the knife fish or the loaches potentially trying to like burrow their way into parts of the pots. But honestly, you're probably okay, right? Because if they have a good sand bed and most of their caves and stuff are down away, and those pots are just kind of sitting open and don't have like a very dug in structure for them to get into, they're probably going to avoid them, and they're going to go to the natural cave places when they want to hide or stay in the sand when they want to sift around and look for stuff. I think it could be okay. I've actually considered something similar in order to keep geophagus, or using like bigger rounded stone gravel as a cap over where I want plants to be, so that they're disincentivized from digging around there, than having sand in areas that they're incentivized to go find their food there, right? There's ways that you can mix these things together. As far as like the mixture of fish and numbers in the tank, sure. I'm not super knowledgeable when it comes to knives. I'm not a big clown loach guy. That's Corey, right? He's the clown loach guy. But, you know, Congo tetras and a lot of those fish, you have a few fish that are kind of shy naturally, but as long as you get food that stays down on the bottom, the Congo tetras will probably leave it alone. The Congos will go for like your mid and high water fish foods and stuff like that, because they can be a little food aggressive, not like I'm going to murder another fish, but just a lot like rainbows where they get to food very fast. They can kind of bully smaller fish away, or shy fish will be less likely to go get food because those fish are so bombastic when it comes to grabbing that food. But otherwise, like, tank sounds fine. Sounds like you got a combination of stuff that both makes you happy and can work to help keep the plants around. The question is whether or not all the fish will just leave them alone when you've set up probably the best scenario to make sure they leave them alone. I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Man, so I'm looking at like Leo saying the Placidochromis. It took me like reading that 3 times for me to mentally put it in my head of how to say it. Well, here you go. John Epson, somebody who I know quite well and trust. My geophagus dig my plants out of pots, even though they have tons of sand to dig in. They laugh at my attempts to plant their tank. Well, hopefully you're a little luckier than poor John there. Yeah. That's the one thing about geophagus I look at. I'm like, but I want to do certain things, but I think like the easiest way is to do like epiphytes, where lots of stuff that attaches to rock and wood, because they're not going to like dig at the wood and rock as much, as long as they got plenty of sand. And the great example of that would be when I went to the Amazon spheres 2.5 years ago. I have an old video. It's back when I shot everything on a cell phone, so it doesn't look amazing. But when me and Randy Reed were hanging out at the spheres, they have this beautiful like circular planted tank that has a ton of geophagus in it, and they have this like sanded ring basically everywhere. Then everything else is up on wood and rock, and they tend to leave that alone. So that's an option, depends on how things go. So you have Babitus on wood with geos, put a crinum in the sand with large rocks stacked around the roots. Yeah, see, great example. Great example of how to try to protect that crinum. I like it. I like it. Fishaholic, I can finally see what's in that tank. My wisteria, there's no wisteria in that tank whatsoever. It's all crypts. Every plant in that tank is a cryptocorine. Every single one. That's not true. I'm sorry, there's one like Reuben sword in there. One little bitty Reuben sword that's like not so happy. It used to be really happy, and then it got all angry at me. But no, there's Cryptlutea hobbit, there's Cryptostata, there's Wendetii tropica, Wendetii green, Lucens, regular Lutea. There's one other one in there. Trying to remember what it is. But yeah, it's a lot of crypts. Oh, there's like some parva in there. That's what it is. It's like little crypt. Little crypt. It's all crypts. I do a lot of crypts. Now you want all of my wisteria is grown floating. None of it's planted. So if you ever want to see my wisteria tanks, they all have it floating. Same with my water sprite. I'm such a slacker. I use it as a floating plant. I much prefer it floating. Also because it's easier to keep in control. It just covers the top of the tank, and then you rip it all out. And yeah. I am due... By the way, for Fishaholic for you, I'm due not... Was it like 2 weeks from now? A week from now? I'm trying to remember where I'm at. A friend of mine and I, who he's on paternity leave because he doesn't do fish at all. He's an old buddy of mine from a long time ago. He and I are actually going down to another friend who opened up a ramen house in the Olympia area. So I'll get in touch with you when that happens and try to drop some plants your way. I can't stay for a long time. I'll be with a friend and driving, but it might be something where I can just meet you at the restaurant or meet you somewhere nearby and get you a bunch of the wisteria that I've got lying around, because I have tons of it. Tons of it. Interesting. Okay, so Zelf, what are your thoughts about Dr. Novak saying cryptocorine are unable to utilize nitrates and just end up storing it? Seems odd to me. So, scientifically speaking, I can't answer that. What I can answer is that I've never set up yet, I plan to, I've never set up any anoxic filtration, and my crypts grow pretty well. Now, that being said, it could easily be mulm that has not gone fully inert, and they're feeding off of the ammonia in its infinitesimally small amounts. But I don't think that that's the case given how explosive I've seen growth, because I'm not putting enough food and fish waste into a tank to produce enough ammonia compared to what the filtration of the tank can handle to make those crypts just blow up. Like, a great example is that tank that has the Aqua Sky right now, where my crypts have just been going gangbusters. They're still going gangbusters. They're getting so dense that if I don't remove some of them, they might start choking each other out. I can't say I've ever had that problem with, the rarer crypts, to where, my 2 species of Nurii and my Jacobsoni pinks are getting so dense, I have to start removing baby plants and thinning the herd, if you will, because there's so many plants. What a terrible problem to have. And I'm sure there's going to be 10 people who are like, send me the crypts, Bentley. Come on, man. I'm having enough trouble just, like, getting home in a reasonable hour. You think I can make it to the post office? Killing me, people. But, there's no way that tank is producing so much waste, especially because I feed that tank every other day. I don't even feed it every day. Right? And it doesn't have a very small amount of fish, but it doesn't have it's not horribly overstocked, right? It's my group of running rivers, a couple younger plecos, and that's basically it. There's one guppy in there, one color-colored blue Hawaiian Moscow, who is a gorgeous fish. Just in order to keep the strain the color it's supposed to be, have to remove that boy because he's the wrong colors. Oh, and there's two very small reticulated SAEs to help deal with some of the algae I've been getting, because it's full summer. You're getting all the summer sun plus this plus that, and so getting in some of the slow growing plants, we're getting some algae. That's gonna happen. It happens this time of year all the time for me. Steve P's like, send me the crypts. Get out of here. But I would argue that there's no way that tank is producing so much ammonia that those crypts could feed off of not nitrate. Can I scientifically prove this? No. And I like Dr. Novak a lot. I want to be clear. I like a lot of his theories and stuff. They're interesting to me. I need to, experiment with them myself just to see how things work and run. But I can't say I agree with the statement. But I have no scientific basis to, actually argue the point. I just have, some reasonable levels of logic from an idiot. Which is me, because I'm an idiot. If I can do what I do with plants, anyone can. It's just screwing up enough times and being so ludicrously stubborn to give up that you just keep trying, and then you will find success. That's the only thing I've done. Okay. I'm going to say this really wrong, but it looks like knit frog. As in to knit, right? Welcome to Rainbow Fish, man. You went all the way up there. I appreciate it. You have one of the benefits of being at a Rainbow Fish level, right, is that if you send me an email or you leave comments, you get kind of priority responses. You just have to tag the email. There's a thing that should tell you in your member benefits how to do that, right? Right? So if you do have questions, my email, bentley.pasco@gmail.com. Make sure you do what the little member benefit tells you. You'll get priority responses. Try to even do it same day. Can't always promise that because sometimes my work is like last week, but I do my best. Alyssa, no, it keeps the crypts, spreads them out, keeps them. I have plenty, don't worry. But yeah. It's one of those things where I actually need to spread those for members of the club because I don't think enough people in the club have some of the rarer crypts that I've got lying around. So I actually need to, let other people get them instead of hoarding them all. Because normally I don't sell crypts. I never sell crypts because I keep them all the time. But I finally have grown enough at this point that I can, let some go and not hamper myself. I am such a greedy person when it comes to crypts, though. I won't lie. I love them to death. Let's see here. So, we're getting close to end time. Last couple questions. Again, at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy. If for some reason I missed your question, hopefully I didn't. Bentley.pasco@gmail.com is my email. Right now, typically about 4 to 5 days to get to stuff, but I've been catching up, thankfully. I was, way behind, and I've caught up. I spent a good amount of time in my last weekend catching up while also doing some other stuff. Did a lot of fish stuff over the weekend, I won't lie. Snail Team 6. Bentley, how would crypts do in pool sand? So, certain crypts do better than others, but in general, it's a really slow slog to get them happy. Crypts are heavy root feeders, So when you start constricting around the roots, or more importantly, if that sand is super fine, which is what most pool filter sand is, excuse me, it's hard to get those extra nutrients down to their roots to where they can feed properly. That being said, I've had plenty of crypts in a pool filter sand tank, and they've done okay. But the second I moved them anywhere, they just like went hog wild because they opened up and had room. One of the ways that you can help with that is if underneath your pool filter sand there is a layer of really small lava rocks, like the kind of stuff you can get at like a Home Depot or Lowe's or any garden supply store that they'll use. Often they'll use it to go, instead of bark, you'll use lava stone over parts of your garden in order to help prevent weeds and minimize them. Put that stuff down first and then the sand over the top, and it relieves a little bit of the pressure when the roots dig down and gives us something to grab onto. It does help. It does help a ton. But yeah. I can grow wisteria without trying. For some reason, not this water sprite though. I don't know. I grow them the same way, and they both grow like gangbusters. But to be fair, they love Seattle water. So, and in those tanks, those tanks tend to have slightly heavier fish loads, so they got extra fish poo to live off of. Filigree Aquatics. This is the most Seattle question. I just learned about Dick's Burgers. Dick's is a small local chain of hamburger joints. It's been around since the 50s in the Seattle area. Better than In-N-Out. They're different. You have people who like treat In-N-Out like it's a religion. Just like you'll have people in Texas who love their Whataburger. Everybody loves their local burger. And almost always, inherently, it's not the quality of the food that makes you go, this is the best burger. It's because it's our burger, right? It's that same thing with, like, the cheap, crappy beer that's made locally to you where it's like, it's not good, but it's ours, right? It's that mentality where, like, why would you have a Heineken when you could have a Rainier beer in Seattle? And it's one of those things where it's like, Rainier beer is not good, but it's our beer. Right, it's one of those things. Here you go. Tetra Guy, Texas. I might have done that on purpose. Whataburger is the best. You know, it's like that where like your locals are going to be super defensive of that thing that is special to them and local. I love Dick's Drive-In. They make a great simple burger, right? It's one of those things that, like, is it more expensive than like your McDonald's and all that stuff? Yeah. Is it worth the difference in price? Yeah, your local burgers are always going to be like that. I would argue, actually, the best burger in Seattle is probably Red Mill, which it's a single place. It's not a chain. It's a little slower, a little more expensive, but it's super, super good. They have amazing bacon, you know, if you like a bacon cheeseburger. But I don't know, man. Like, In-N-Out has its quality that's special about it. They have a mystique around them, just like Shake Shack has that. Whataburger in Texas. There's the people who love their White Castle. I've had White Castle. I was not a fan of it personally. Like, it's just it was not my jam. But for some people, I can understand it. Everybody's got their thing. It's local to them, right? I would say that if I had my choice between, say, like, In-N-Out, Whataburger, and all those local ones, I'm going to pick my local burger only because it's my local burger. It has history. It has nostalgia. I go there and I remember my childhood, right? I go to that place and I remember the first time I was ever there with my mom after a doctor's appointment when I was a little kid. It's not about how good the food is necessarily, so much as the nostalgia of things that tie to my childhood make them better. They gain something special, that's special quality. Like, let me give you an example, right? We're going to tangent way off of fish, I know. This happens all the time. You guys are used to this by now if you've been around a lot. Pizza. I love pizza. Right? Now, of all the big chains of pizza, My favorite has always been Godfather's. It's not because it's the best pizza. It's because I have all this nostalgia to Godfather's when they used to be in Seattle. There's none of them in Seattle anymore. There is like 2 left total in the state, and I have to go pretty far away to get to them. But I can remember when my cousin Henry, who you've seen if you watch the Petco Horror Stories videos, would come into town from Eastern Washington when he used to live in Yakima, and my mom would take us to Godfather's Pizza for lunch, because they had a lunch buffet, and they had a bunch of arcades, and she would give each of us $5 in quarters, and she would just sit there with a book and read her book, right, and let us, like, grab a couple slices of pizza, come eat the pizza, all right, run over and start playing video games. Done playing video games for a few minutes, come get some more pizza, right? Just let the 2 dumb kids go hog wild, have their fun. We'd be there for like 2 hours, right? Playing video games, playing on the arcade machines, having a slice or 2 pizza, having a drink, you know, getting your soda out of the fountain, all that kind of stuff. Even just like the little salad bar that was there that was like faux healthy, like, you know, all these things. It was about the nostalgia. Nothing to do with the quality of the pizza. Which, you know, back then I would argue it was one of the better chains for the Seattle area. But, like, there was far better pizza. There's way better pizza. But none of it has that nostalgia. I was actually, like... I went and visited a friend over the weekend. And he lives kind of near one of the only few Godfathers left in the state. And other than it was like so busy, I never got a chance to go really get food until I started driving home. And trying to eat pizza driving is not a smart idea. But, and I had joked with my lady on the way out. That's like, I'm going to be near a Godfather's. I'm going there. I'm going there to find out if it's still as good as I remember. And the answer is it probably isn't. Like, nothing is ever as good as you remember. But the nostalgia is what makes it special. And when it's special, it kind of can't ever be ruined. Because eventually you'll go like, yeah, I got to go to that last one. Or I got to go to Dick's. Right? That's the Seattle classic. It's things like that are just... There's something you do. And if I were to be at a drive-in, because there is one terribly far from my house in the grand scheme of things, compared to like the ones in actual Seattle. There's one in Kent, although it's the complete opposite side of Kent. It takes like 25 minutes to get there, depending on how traffic is. It's always a deluxe fry chocolate shake. That's the combo. I think you get all of the things that are special to that place in that little order. It's not a ton of food, but it's kind of rich, so it does the trick. Right? It's right where it's at. It's perfect. Doesn't need to be messed up with. There's several people talking. Now we're talking food. Like at Wendy's, talking about the spicy chicken versus the square burger patties, the taco pizza from Godfather's. Other people mentioning all sorts of stuff. Kuma's Corner. I'm curious where that is. You want something kind of weird that's in the Seattle area? There's this place called Katsu Burger. So it's like Japanese fusion with burgers. So think about like getting like pork or chicken katsu on a burger. Right? So it's crazy, but it's good. It's this weird fusion of things that is really great. Anyway, Dr. Black comes up in like 7 minutes or so. Yeah, it was cars last week. It's food this week. We're just going to derail all over the place at the end of streams. It's how it is. Paul Soltero, after a night out with the boys, White Castles just finishes the night. Sure, depending on what kind of beverages you've drank, I can totally understand. And when I had White Castle, the only thing I could think of is like, if I had like been out at a bar or something, like one thing I used to love doing with a bunch of my friends is we would go to a sports bar locally and we'd throw darts for like hours. And none of us are big drinkers at all, but like when you're there for several hours, you have a couple of drinks and it just is not much. But it's the whole, like, you sip, enjoy your thing. It's the social aspect of it. I can totally understand after an adult beverage. White Castle's probably a lot better than when I had it. But for me, not my jam. Just saying. Mike Stamba, peddling my rant of the day. My clown will just keep uprooting my crinum plants. Put big rocks around your crinums. Big rocks. Just like get your like river stone and make like a little fortress around your crinum to protect it. Leave like a really small gap like that, right? Like the size of a 50-cent piece for everything to come up from the middle. You'd be good. You'd be good. Crown Burger. Where is that? I'm curious. I'd have to look it up. But regardless, we're past time. We're babbling about all sorts of random stuff. Guys, I really appreciate it. Hopefully, in the near future, we'll know whether the truth is that can a digital fish club work? I'd love to see. I want to find out. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to Corey's, along with seeing what some of the other like true classic clubs do with the digital outreach they've begun. I hope you guys are excited too. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. And if you missed it, my guppies are for sale over redfishbluefish.shop. And stay awesome.